Chapter 5. Welcome back, my fellow horror enthusiasts. We heard about some of the world's deadliest men, but now we have more to offer you. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. Some killers horrify us with the number of their victims. Others, with their brutality. But Jeffrey Dahmer shocked the world in a way that no one had ever seen before. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 young men. But his crimes went far beyond killing. Inside his small Milwaukee apartment, police uncovered a scene that seemed ripped from a nightmare. Skulls, human remains preserved in jars, and photographs documenting every step of his killings. Dahmer didn't just murder. He dismembered. He preserved. And in some cases, he ate parts of his victims. The media would forever call him the Milwaukee Cannibal. What's perhaps most chilling is how close Dahmer came to being caught many times. Neighbors often complained about the smell from his apartment. At one point, police officers actually returned an escaped victim back to Dahmer, believing it was just a lover's quarrel. That man was killed shortly afterward. Dahmer's final arrest came when another victim managed to escape and flagged down police. When officers entered his apartment, they were stunned by what they found. The refrigerator contained human remains. The walls held Polaroid photos of dismembered bodies. It was evidence so overwhelming that the world could hardly believe it was real. During his trial, Dahmer sat quietly, showing little emotion. He admitted everything, describing his compulsion in a calm, almost clinical tone. He was sentenced to life in prison, where, in 1994, he was beaten to death by another inmate. The horror of Dahmer's crimes wasn't just in the killings, it was in the ritual. The obsession. The cold way he cataloged death as if it were a collection. He forced us to ask, how can someone so ordinary-looking hide such unimaginable darkness? John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. He made children laugh at parties, dressing as Pogo the Clown. But behind the painted smile was a man hiding one of the darkest secrets in American crime. John Wayne Gacy was a respected member of his community in Illinois. He ran a contracting business, was involved in local politics, and often entertained children as a clown. But his house would become one of the most disturbing crime scenes ever discovered. Throughout the 1970s, Gacy lured teenage boys and young men to his home with promises of work or money. Once inside, they were never seen alive again. Police eventually uncovered the truth: 29 bodies buried in the crawl space beneath his house. Others were dumped in nearby rivers. The idea that a man who performed as a clown, an image of joy and innocence, was secretly a sadistic killer shocked the nation. Clowns were never viewed the same way again. During his trial, Gacy tried to claim insanity, but the evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted of 33 murders and sentenced to death. In 1994, he was executed by lethal injection. His final words were chilling: "Kiss my ass." The horror of John Wayne Gacy was not just in the murders, but in the mask he wore. The smiling clown. The neighbor you thought you could trust. Proof that evil can wear the brightest colors. Andrei Chikatilo, the butcher of Rostov. In Soviet Russia, during the 1970s and 80s, one man turned entire cities into hunting grounds. His name was Andrei Chikatilo, but history remembers him as the butcher of Rostov. Chikatilo murdered at least 52 women and children. His crimes were unspeakable, leaving victims mutilated beyond recognition. What made it worse was the political climate. Soviet authorities denied that a serial killer could exist in their society. For years, they ignored or covered up the crimes, allowing Chikatilo to keep killing. It wasn't until 1990 that he was finally caught, after years of terrorizing families and leaving entire regions in fear. During his trial, his confessions were so graphic that even seasoned investigators were shaken. He was executed by firing squad in 1994. His story remains a dark chapter in Russian history, a reminder of what happens when denial and secrecy give a killer freedom to thrive. Pedro Lopez, the monster of the Andes. Some serial killers are terrifying because of how many victims they leave behind. One of the most disturbing of them all is Pedro Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes. Lopez confessed to murdering more than 300 young girls across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru during the 1970s and 80s. He preyed on the vulnerable, street children, often from impoverished families. When he was finally caught in 1980, he calmly described his crimes, even leading police to mass graves. He was convicted, but here's the most chilling part. Lopez was released in the 1990s after serving just 18 years. To this day, no one knows where he is. Some reports suggest he may have killed again. Others claim he vanished into the shadows. The thought that one of the most prolific killers in history could still be free is enough to keep you awake at night. Harold Shipman, Dr. Death. Not all killers hide in dark alleys or creep through shadows. Some sit in positions of trust. Some wear white coats. Harold Shipman was a respected doctor in the United Kingdom. Patients trusted him with their lives. But over the course of decades, he used that trust to kill. By injecting lethal doses of drugs into his patients, mostly elderly women, Shipman murdered at least 200 people, possibly more. Unlike other killers, his motives were never entirely clear. Was it power? Control? Or something darker? When investigators finally uncovered his crimes, the nation was horrified. A man sworn to heal had instead become one of the deadliest serial killers in history. In 2000, Shipman was sentenced to life in prison. 4 years later, he hanged himself in his cell. His case changed medical practices across the UK, introducing stricter rules for monitoring doctors. But the shadow he cast still lingers. For if you can't trust your own doctor, who can you trust? Why we fear them. What is it about serial killers that fascinates us? Why do we tell their stories over and over? Part of it is fear. These killers remind us that evil isn't always a monster under the bed. Sometimes it's the neighbor, the doctor, the clown at the children's party. Part of it is curiosity. We want to understand how a human mind can twist so far from empathy, from morality, from humanity itself. But maybe the most unsettling truth is this: they are proof of what humans are capable of. Proof that inside the same species that builds, loves, and creates, there also exists the potential to destroy without mercy. Serial killers are living reminders that the line between normalcy and horror is thinner than we'd like to believe. You've just heard the stories of some of the greatest and most terrifying serial killers in history. From Jack the Ripper's foggy streets, to the murder castle, to Bundy's charm, Dahmer's apartment, and Gacy's clown suit. They lived among us. They walked in daylight. And they left scars on history that may never fully fade. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe for more chilling stories from the dark corners of history. And remember, the scariest monsters are not in your nightmares. They might be sitting right next to you. Good night, and stay safe.